Worried that no one would come, so we're really happy you're here. I'm Megan from the TOSA All City Reads Committee. This is one of our last events actually. There's only 4 more. There's 2 more in March and 2 in April. So be sure to check our website and come to those. We are fundraising for the Ability Gym, so there's a donation box at the back. And we just want to always thank our sponsors, especially Beth Jaworski, who has made a lot of this possible. So tonight we are going to be learning about how to protect local waterways, and we're going to be hearing from kind of different levels. So we have Samantha Catt from the DNR from the state level. We have Maggie Anderson from TOSA Water, so we can hear what's happening here. And then we have Cheryl from Milwaukee Riverkeeper, so we can learn more about like what everyday people can do. So please join me in welcoming them.
All right. So yeah, Samantha Catt. I'm with the Wisconsin DNR, and at the DNR I work in the stormwater program. I know when we first chatted, I was a little bit concerned because I'm like, well, I'm not really in drinking water, but big picture is all water relates or interacts with each other. So yeah, I work in the stormwater program, and specifically I work in the Municipal Separate Storm Sewer System Permit, so that's MS4 permit. So essentially big municipalities that have urbanization, that have human activity, that have pollutants that are, part of being in a city, require a permit. That's like the Spark Mills version of it, and actually City of Wauwatosa is one of my permittees. So the MS4 permit, it's pretty complex. There's a lot of different programs within it, but today we're just sticking real high level, and then I wanted to talk about what you can do to help water quality. So the City of Wauwatosa, like other municipalities in the state of Wisconsin and throughout the US, do a lot of work, but I'll have Maggie touch on that later. So I'm gonna be talking about how you can help. Yeah, so urban stormwater pollution, here's like the roadmap. So like super brief overview of like what is a watershed, urbanization and like water quality, urban stormwater contaminants, and what you can do to help. So like I said, very brief, what is a watershed? And I kind of put these quick points or like these big points. So a watershed is an area of land that drains to a water body. Water is always found at the lowest point, right? So everything flows downhill. So whatever's going on in the watershed at the top is gonna happen at the watershed at the bottom, and whatever's happening at the land in that watershed is gonna happen to the water. So what happens to land happens to water. And so I had mentioned this already, I'm talking about surface waters mainly, but all waters interconnect. So surface waters connect with surface waters, and surface water connects with groundwater. So urbanization, it's development, and how does that impact water quality? So on the left-hand side, there's this pretty simple diagram, but it gets a point across where you have more of a natural area. So you have turf, you have grass and forests and fields. When it rains, the water from the storm water, probably should have mentioned that already, has a chance to infiltrate into the ground, but it still does have some like sheet flow. There's still some like runoff, but it's also running across more of these natural areas. When we start building, when we start to have development in cities that we all live and work and play in, you end up putting hard surfaces on top of what used to be permeable. So you're not getting that infiltration anymore, and so everything is pretty much going to surface runoff. It's all sheet flowing across these hard surfaces. And these hard surfaces, these urban surfaces, have the urban contaminants, which I'll get to more in another slide. So it's like the urbanization kind of creates like the dirt of just people living in cities, and that all impacts surface water. So this again was kind of the big point. So like increased human activity increases the amount of pollutants that are available, that are on these hardscapes, and it increases stormwater pollution. So if we're getting rid of our permeable area, there's less infiltration. If there's less infiltration, there's more sheet flowing across these hard surfaces. So as their water is flowing across our hard surfaces, they're picking up dirt and grime and oil and grease and trash. And more sheet flow is just more opportunity to pick that up. So here's a slide about like urban sources of stormwater pollution. The graphic does a pretty good job listing like big ones. So here, hardscapes is not just like streets and sidewalks, but it's also like roofs, right? It's everything that the water can't get into. So whatever is on your roof when it rains, you know, it's coming down into your gutters, and it could be going across your lawn. So it could be picking up like fertilizers or pet waste. It might not be going across your lawn. It could be going right onto the street. The street is full of, bless you.
Thank you.
The kind of grime that you see on the streets, so grease and oil. And I'll say that, you know, in this picture there's like this big puddle of oil, but naturally just stuff comes off of our cars. So it doesn't have to be intentional. It's not somebody who's always putting something there, but it could be, you know, a leaking car that you don't know about. I do have car washing here as well. So if you're washing like your car in your driveway and that's full of soap, that water is going to go into a storm drain and into the river. And then, yeah, I have some other ones listed like dirt, litter, debris, heavy metals. One source of them is like brake dust. So if you're using your brakes when you drive your car, you could be contributing heavy metals. Road salt is something that I'm thinking that we're gonna talk about later. And then I put this on here as well, leaves and grass clippings. It's a source of urban stormwater pollution. But working at the DNR and working at cities and working in, you know, water quality, we sometimes get questions like, well, animals poop in the wild, so why do I need to pick up my dog poop? Or leaves are natural, like how can they be a source of pollution? And so if you're thinking back to that graphic I had showed at the beginning where there was a less urbanized area and the more urbanized area, you're right, like organic materials like leaves and grass and animal poo, like those are natural. But these natural areas can handle those natural sources better. So in an urbanized area, when we are funneling all of these natural elements from other places and putting them all into one natural resource, we're over inundating that system, we're overwhelming the system. So like plants, you know, leaves and grass, poop from animals, they have a lot of nutrients. You know, that's why composting works. So although these things are good and they're natural, if there's too much of them, that's a bad thing. So yeah, this urbanization transports organic materials to these natural areas and it overwhelms them. This is a great picture I found on Google, it's perfect. There's a dog right on top of the storm drain. So yeah, what can you do? So a couple things that I'm just gonna be touching on, like illicit discharges. So that's like illicit dumping. That's something that can be intentional or like unintentional, right? So one thing that you could do is like don't dump anything down the storm drain or into the street. And then I have like, if you see something, say something. So you can call your local municipality, you can call DNR. If you Google like spills hotline, you'll get a hold of somebody, it's 24 hours a day. If it's something that's hazardous, that's really not good, like call 911. They also have like spills responses. So the question, like, should everything be reported to like the city or DNR? If it's something that's very obvious, like it's chemicals, yes, like please report it because we want to try to capture it and clean it up before it can do any more damage. So one thing that has popped up fairly recently, like it pops up and then it goes away and then it comes up again. Professional carpet cleaners, like I will get calls, you know, they clean like a house and then right outside the house, they just empty up their truck and it's right into a storm drain.
Painters too, sometimes.
Painters, yeah, so if you see something, give people a call. If you're comfortable talking with the person, my recommendation is to start with education. You know, some folks don't know that the storm drain doesn't go to a wastewater treatment plant, but it could be a confrontational thing, so that's why we want to make sure that you're equipped with numbers to call other people. Should everything be reported to the city or the DNR? I have like this use best judgment, you know, like, but if, when you're in doubt, like, yes. So like a residential, like, your neighbor's washing their car in their driveway, is that something that needs to be like called to DNR spills hotline? No, these small releases like are allowed. But if it's something that's like they're washing their car every day, or they're like washing everyone's car in the neighborhood, let somebody know. Maybe, you know, and I said use your best judgment, so it might not be something where there's like enforcement action, a big cleanup and a big, you know, you're in trouble, but something like education could work. So just having, like, has anyone seen, like the storm drain, like emblems, or the, what do you call the like cast iron?
The back box.
The back box, where it says like no dumping, like drains to lake or drains to
Some of
water.
ours have that stencil.
Yeah, we
on
have
it.
the storm drain.
Or stencil,
It's on
yeah.
a picture of
The desk curb markers.
Yeah,
Yeah, we have
That's
those curb
probably one of them.
markers. Yeah.
okay.
Well, it's got both of them on it.
This one has both, yeah, but it
it.
doesn't have the.
Sometimes it's been stenciled on as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sometimes like education helps. There's a story from a stormwater engineer, that we work with, and back when she was in school, like, she didn't know that storm drains went to the rivers, and the lakes, the surface waters, and so she has these stories about like cleaning out her car and like putting garbage down the storm drain,
Oh,
like
gosh.
she didn't know. And now that's what her profession is. So yeah, sometimes like education just works. I do have a couple more slides, but did anyone have questions?
I did have oh, yeah, and maybe that you'll get to this, but sometimes when I have a hard time is when, you know, like a project may or may not, like, require a permit and erosion control, but when you have so many, like, smaller lots, like in a city, and there's, you know, it can like really add up. I mean, you can really
Right.
see the sediment, you know, there's like
Yeah.
a significant rainfall, and you just see the sediment just pouring down the streets. And that's where I don't know what to do.
That's a
Cause I'm not sure, like, is this
Yeah.
triggering a permit, should they have BMPs out?
That's
Who
a
do I
really-
who would I call?
That's a good
In the
example of
city, like
using
in
your
the
best judgment, like, yeah, it seems like it's a small property and it probably doesn't have a permit, but like, this just doesn't feel right, like, this is weird, like, let somebody know. Would you get a call like that?
It
And
would
like-
typically come to the city's building and permitting department. And so we do permit erosion control. The trigger is 4,000 square feet,
Okay,
which is pretty big for our small lots.
yeah,
Mhm.
So, you know, if you're seeing a 10 by 10 area that could be totally bare and it rains and it runs off, there isn't a lot we can do. But we do, a lot of those that you see, they might have active permits, and you calling is a good trigger for us to go inspect and tell them to get their stuff back in place. If you
Yeah.
ever see silt fences waving and they're not buried, if there's a silt fence in, they probably have a permit, so you can always call us.
right, if there's a maintenance
Mhm.
issue with that.
Yeah, and if there's not a permit and we talk about like, you know, 10 foot by 10 foot piece of exposed soil, and when it rains, it looks really bad, maybe there's not a whole lot we can do as far as like regulation, but again, like, education can go a long way. Like, some people honestly just don't know that it's a problem, or like the slide I had with, you know, how can leaves be a source of pollution? Like, they're natural, like dirt is natural, and so when you start to explain how it impacts water and what that actually means, like, you know, you can get people on board.
Certainly seems counterintuitive, you're putting all your leaves in the street in the fall, and they sit there for weeks, if not months.
it depends.
And they get run over and broken up and running down the drain.
There you go. Yeah, so I'll go back to road salt, but yeah, lawn care. So there are, so like, trees are good, right? So this is always a hard conversation, like, trees are good, they provide like shade and the urban heat island effect and biodiversity and aesthetics. But then they also drop all their leaves, and they drop them on the concrete, and then when the leaves, because they have nutrients, right, like phosphorus is the big one with leaves. When they get saturated, so when they get rained on or when they get snow, they release all that phosphorus, and that's not good. And so one of the things that we recommend, because leaf collection is a thing, in a lot of municipalities, not all municipalities. There's a handful, even in southeastern Wisconsin, where the municipality doesn't collect the leaves. They tell you to figure out what to do with them, but to not put them in the street, because I always ask them. So things that you could do is like, mulching like your leaves in place, you know, they're a fertilizer, it's a natural thing, like put it on your lawn. But if they are collected in the street, can you put them out right before collection? And when it comes to collection services, I'm gonna have to defer you to Maggie, when it comes to like Waterways practices. But yeah, if you're gonna put leaves on the street for collection, it should be happening right before collection happens.
I think there is advice to like at least keep them away from where like water is flowing, you know, at least create like a little bit of a space.
We have an app for that.
You do.
I'll go over it.
The Milwaukee just put out there, hope for the best.
When
Hope they pick it up in 3 months.
Going back to like washing the car in the driveway, or the painters or whoever trying to wash off their stuff and it goes onto the gutter. So like where, if they were at my house, if they were doing work on my house, and then I really would feel a little bit more appropriate about approaching them, where should they be putting it then? Can I have them put it down my deep sink and then it goes through the right pipes to the right place?
So they should, so I'm not an industrial like carpet cleaner or painter, but they have like the holding tanks in their trucks, so they don't need to discharge it onto the street. Where they're supposed to be discharging is, somewhere in the realm of sanitary, and I don't know if that's like back at their shop, they have like a sanitary drain that they discharge to and everything is fine, or if they have to have like a permit for it, or if they have to bring it somewhere
There's industrial
specifically.
pre-treaters, sometimes they take it to,
Yeah,
or they
I
might
think
have.
the best it would be a question of like, what's your practice in disposing of your,
right.
Yeah, they should
of your
know.
cleaners? They
Yeah,
should know
they should know.
what materials they use
Kind
and
of
all
ask
the.
them ahead of time before they even get to the house.
Yeah.
It tends to
They
be
should have a-
smaller people, I think, that are
They
just
might
kind of
not.
doing it on the side, or like, you know, they're not like, the bigger companies, I think, have a good system in place.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know, I've like, I mean, I used to like, I like see people all the time in the city of Milwaukee just like dumping stuff in the alley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like John's like painting or something, you're like, you can't do that, and he's like, it's fine, ma'am, and I'm like, no, it's really not okay. You don't know who you came upon, like, I'm calling like DNS right now, it's like, that's
Yeah.
not okay. But, yeah, I mean, I was once, a funny random story, I was like, we got a call once about a guy, he was like fishing off of Capitol Drive, and he's like, there's like a white like river of like, it looks like paint like coming in from the storm drain, and I was like, that doesn't sound good. And so we like ran up there, and it was, someone was painting the McDonald's, there's like McDonald's on Capitol just west of the Milwaukee River, if you know where that is. And they were like striping the, and I think the guys just took it and dumped it all in the storm sewer.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And then it was like, there was literally a guy out there like fishing, he like called it in. And so we were able to bust them, but I mean, sometimes you're not that lucky.
Yeah, that's right by the park, that's.
Yeah.
Right.
Right fish.
A lot of
Yeah.
people do.
Well, that's a good point too, like, the people who are looking for illicit discharges or things that are bad, we're not everywhere all the time. So if something looks not right, give somebody a call. Cause maybe it's nothing and that's great, but it could be something like, like paint or oil or, other chemicals.
So, because someone mentioned about going down the sanitary, can the sanitary system handle paint?
They probably don't want to.
No,
Yeah.
it should just be human waste and that's it, everything
As a
else has to be
homeowner, you
pre-treated.
shouldn't dump paint down your.
Well, you're cleaning
toilet.
out the roller, for instance, or your brushes.
I know,
Yeah,
it's,
I think those small amounts.
I mean, is it recommended, take the roller off and throw it away, don't clean it?
Then
Throw
you-
your brush away,
Yeah.
don't clean it?
Then you got
Well,
landfill
it's-
issues.
I know with the cans
Stick
that
issue.
if the paint is completely dried, you know,
Yeah.
you can throw
Throw
it
it
away,
out,
but
yeah.
otherwise you should be taking it to the hazardous,
Well, and along those same lines then, like when you go and you get those carpet cleaner things yourself, and then like the ones that you just go and rent from like Home Depot or whatever, and then like you put the soap in the one container and then it goes into the other container and it's all gross, what are you supposed to do with that then? Like as just a homeowner just doing basic stuff?
I just put it on my sink.
Yeah, I always
Right.
would put that down my toilet or my deep sink.
Right.
Is that not right?
That is what I would do.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Like, So, like,
I think soap's a lot, I mean, it kinda depends on the chemicals, but yeah, soap is
Right.
Should be
fine.
pretty harmless.
right, and I can't remember.
Paint
where I,
is
like-
hard, I mean, I'd probably just try to clean the brush off as much as possible
Yeah.
first, with like a cloth or something and try to minimize the rinsing, but that's a hard one.
Well, they always
Right.
tell you right on the paint can
Yeah.
in the commercials, clean up with water.
Yeah.
Right.
Cause cause you can clean it up with water, but then your water is dirty,
Mhm.
and then your dirty water is supposed to go somewhere where you can treat it,
Right.
for paint.
Agreed.
Not the, like, wastewater treatment plants, which are designed for biological material. But yeah, like, with the illicit discharges, you know, use best judgment when in doubt, like, yeah, give somebody a call. I think, I don't know, we've all, like, at least witnessed, you know, somebody, like, I'm thinking about being on the Milwaukee River in the summer, oh, it's a great thing, and you see somebody who's got like a, I don't know, a Solo cup in their hand, it's full of ice, they finish their drink, you know, they pitch the rest of it in the river. Am I gonna call DNR or Cheryl or Maggie? Probably not, you know, like, it's your best judgment here, but if you're seeing something and you like can't do that education, you're comfortable, or if you're, you know, you're really questioning it, like, give someone a call.
Don't you think too, now with the paint that you bring that up, and the household items we're using, they are more biodegradable, they've had to change some of the chemicals or whatever they're using in it. I mean, I think you could, if you're going out to start a project, you could maybe read more up on what you're purchasing.
Exactly.
Would that be helpful? Maybe we could still be able to do some home projects, cause everybody can't hire painters. Even
Right.
though somebody doesn't like to paint, I'm sorry. So anyway, I just think maybe, yes, I know, so hopefully, maybe we could go that route, and maybe those, people, you know, the companies are actually hopefully changing some of what they're producing, hopefully.
And there are a lot
So
of natural
maybe we
cleaners
could be more
too.
educated
You know, you can do a
that
lot
way
like
too.
with lemon juice and like baking soda
Right.
and, I mean, that stuff doesn't always work, I will admit, but
Right.
I mean, a lot of times, you know, you can use, there's like well, I don't know if in Tosa if there's a business, but like, I know in Milwaukee, there's a new, well, it's not super new, but there's a, I think it's on Fifth, it's called Glass Pantry, and they sell all like kind of
Yeah.
natural stuff. It's under new ownership, actually former intern just bought it, which I'm very excited
But
about.
even our home carpet cleaning things, or our paint that we purchase, maybe we just need to be a little
Yeah.
bit more aware of what we're buying.
Yeah, another great resource for that is, MMSD's website,
Mhm.
the sewage district.
Right.
Their household hazardous waste website is super
Mhm.
extensive.
Well, if you read the book, 1, 2, 3, you might not trust the company.
I know, that's
Yeah.
what I'm hearing.
I know, I know.
That's what I'm hearing. I
Yeah,
did
we
not
didn't
read the book.
Yeah.
Cheryl did.
I did read the book, I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah,
No, I'm joking. And other stuff.
Yeah.
Well, no, but that is a big problem in our system, not to totally digress, but like, you know, we don't have a really good precautionary principle in the US, so you can come up with any product and sell it on the market and with very minimal pre-testing, and then it requires someone like me or like a lot of university scientists doing like a lot of tests and monitoring after the fact and proving that it's has an impact on water or fish or critters, and in some cases, you know, there's been a lot of work on some very damaging chemicals that still haven't been regulated, like perchlorate's a really good example. We haven't added a new chemical to the Safe Drinking Water Act since 1986, because they made it almost impossible to add a new chemical to the Safe Drinking Water Act. So, vinyl chloride, like a lot of these that we know are really toxic, they're still not even really regulated.
No solvents, right, like people can just buy those.
It's hard, and the other thing is, well, and this applies to salt too, but like, you don't even know, a lot of these companies, they don't even have to really tell you what's in it. Like road salt, like we've been talking about trying to do a bill where they'd be required to, like, they basically can say that there's calcium chloride, they could say that it's like a environmentally friendly mix. You don't know if that's 80% rock salt and 20% calcium chloride, 95% rock salt, 5% calcium chloride. They like have to tell you generally, but they don't have to tell you everything in it, that's in it. And Reinders, which is like a supplier of salt, they don't even know what's in the stuff that they're buying.
Right.
Like completely, because there's like all of these, like, you know, like there's incredible protections on
Like
the manufacturer.
The trade, like, secrets.
Yes.
I wanna say
It's
it's
like
Ohio.
Proprietary.
Is actually brining their streets with, fracking fluid.
Yeah, that's horrifying.
Yeah.
That is happening in a lot of, in
Yeah.
Pennsylvania too, I
And
think.
it's like, well, you don't know what's, you don't know what's in the fracking fluid, but if they won't tell you, it's probably not good. But it
Yeah.
gets rid of the ice, so we put it on our streets.
Well, they're putting coal ash in like drywall and putting coal ash on our roads and,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like a lot of this stuff is, if you really start to think about it.
Yeah, and with road salt, I'll say that we live in Wisconsin, it's snowing right now, like, there is, a benefit to using something like road salt, but there's a couple things that you can do, like, don't over salt. You know, you don't need to just pour and pour and pour stuff on. You know, when the snow event is over, you can sweep up the excess salt. If, you know, sometimes it's too cold for salt to work, or sometimes, like, if you have a sidewalk, you know, that there's a tree growing underneath and there's a big crack and now there's this much ice there, like, salt is not gonna take care of it, so maybe you're looking at something like sand for abrasion. One of the things that we've been diving into, like, conversations is, municipalities are tracking, you know, their salt usage, and they're going to trainings, and they're trying to figure out, like, how to put down an effective and efficient amount of, material. DNR doesn't have the regulation on private contractors. So, like, some things that we've heard, the private contractors, like, they charge you for the amount of materials that they use. So they have an incentive to just continue to put down more and more and more salt, and then they don't wanna come back and everything should be fine and, you know, it'll just wash away. So if you're using like a private contractor, like, talk to them, ask about like their contractor, like what you could do. This is like on all my slides, like educating and encouraging like your family and friends. You know, if there's a lot of, you know, your, I don't know, parents, siblings, cousins, you know, neighbors are just tossing out a bunch of salt, like, you can provide some education. One of the
There's
other
a new
things
bill,
that's,
there's the private contractor bill that's just been introduced.
yeah,
Anyway.
we will see, fingers
Yes.
crossed.
There was a bill that was just introduced in the state legislature, which I don't know if you know about, but, that basically would say if you're a private contractor and you went through a training that like Riverkeeper held or another organization, Saltwise, you know, DNR or anybody, that they could become they would take a test essentially, and if they passed it and paid a fee to DNR, they would be certified as essentially a trained, you know, winter de-icing professional. And so that would essentially give them a shield to litigation, which is one of the big issues that a lot of private companies, you know, even if they know it's too cold and the salt's not working, they'll still have people salt because they're afraid someone's gonna slip and fall and sue them. Or they go out, or these companies get paid every time they go out, so they're incentivized to just go out and apply too much.
Yep.
So this would kind of, this is meant to kind of address that issue, so it was just introduced, I think it's like SB 52, Senate Bill 52.
Yeah, and it's a bipartisan,
They're 0 for 3 passing it in
So-
Minnesota, but,
Yeah.
I think people are pretty hopeful about it, but, that's something that you guys could definitely support, but we can talk more about that.
sounds good.
Yeah, I'm excited, I hope it goes somewhere.
You said bipartisan.
It was
Yeah, it was
introduced in a
introduced, yeah.
bipartisan, but,
Well, I'm taking it. Good.
It is, it's better than not being introduced on a bipartisan.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, if you see something, say something doesn't look right, give somebody a call, do some education, encourage friends, family. I have this little asterisk at the bottom, it's not road salt, but I've always lived in the city where I've never had to deal with a water softener, so when these questions first came up, I was like, I don't know what this is. But the questions were like, you know, I've got this backwash from my water softener, like, what do I do with it? And I'm like, I don't know, cause I don't know what it is. But it's salty water, so you don't wanna put that into something that's gonna discharge into your storm drain or like into surface waters. So some pumps do discharge into your storm sewer and your surface water, so if you have, water softener backwash, don't put it into your sump pump, cause that's just salt water.
Or
Is-
anything.
Isn't it Wauwatosa, you're supposed to have your sump pump discharge into your yard, not into the road?
Correct, a little
Okay.
bit, mostly. Your sump pump discharge, the only absolute is that cannot go to the sanitary system.
Right.
So we do have, homes where originally you have a foundation drain, the old Palmer valve, and that goes to the sanitary sewer system. So much of East Tosa still has a foundation drain system connected to the sanitary sewer system. which is not as much of a problem for water quality, it's a problem for the sewerage district because
Volume.
they're treating clear water when they don't
Right.
want
Know
to
that,
be
I
treating
thought
clear
that
water.
would go
Clear
to
water.
storm sewer.
No. So over time, the idea, when you hear roof drain disconnect or foundation drain disconnect, that's an effort to get that clear water out of the sanitary sewer system. So sump pump discharge can come out above grade onto your lawn. They used to allow them to core a hole in the side of the curb.
Mhm.
We don't allow that anymore because it creates the icing in the street.
Okay.
In some areas, we have little collector systems, like a 6-inch pipe that's behind the sidewalk that people can connect to. And you can also, and we would prefer you connect that sump pump to the storm sewer system in areas where we have icing or ponding, or we have clay soils, small front yards, flat streets. We'd rather see the sump pump go to the storm sewer. And that's why we never want water softener backwash, or some people might put their laundry machine discharge into a sump pump.
Yeah,
We never wanna
Caught that
see,
before with somebody calling it in.
Yeah.
They were looking at an outfall, and they're like,
Well,
some
if-
pumps
if-
go
coming out
into
of this,
storm.
yeah.
If you have construction done today, the sump pump generally is set up so that it no longer goes into the sanitary sewer. It goes into your yard,
Correct.
right,
but people reroute things a lot.
Yes,
But still, it shouldn't go out into the storm sewer, or, I'm sorry, sanitary
the
sewer.
sanitary sewer.
There's no other, is there still well and septic in Tosa at all?
No.
no.
So I don't think this shouldn't be an issue here.
Right.
Cause if you did have a really salty,
Yeah.
you'd want it to go into the sanitary.
Right. It shouldn't be, but yeah, I've been asked those questions, and I'm like, I don't know, cause I've just always lived like with Lake Michigan water, and I've
Yeah.
never had a water softener. I was like, what do
You
you
go
need
to Costco, you
backwash?
see people buying bags of
Yeah,
cement.
I was like, what is that?
Um,
Yeah, so we talked about, lawn care a little bit, like with leaves. Same thing goes with like grass clippings in the summertime, like don't push your grass clippings out into the street, cause that's gonna go in the storm drain, it's gonna go to the surface waters. I've been at Lake Michigan, in the summertime, and where the outfalls are, the storm sewer outfalls, like grass clippings come out, and that just, there's a water quality issue there too, but there's an aesthetics thing, and it's annoying, right? I just wanna sit on my cute little floaty and not be covered in grass clippings, so please don't put them in the street. And then, yeah, with like the chemicals, any kind of chemicals or nutrients that we're putting on your lawn, you know, like don't over apply. Anything that's not absorbed into the soil, it's just gonna get washed off, so it's pointless, it's expensive. Don't apply any kind of chemicals before rain, it's just gonna get washed off. Or if you have property that's close to the shoreline, like don't put chemicals there, cause it's gonna wash off into the surface water. Consider a lawn that doesn't require chemicals. Or ask like, do you need to put chemicals on your lawn? You know, not everyone has like the greenest of green, like golf course front lawns, like it's okay to make it look a little bit more natural. I would say we're trending that way, which is nice. And yeah, native plants, you know, they help the pollinators, but they also soak up more water, so there's less water that can sheet flow across those hard surfaces, and pick up the urban contaminants and discharge it. So, yeah, just always trying to think big picture, like, do I need this? You know, if I do, what's the smartest way to go about it? So yeah, for stormwater, think like, what is the source? How is it getting to the surface water, and like, where is that surface water? And so yeah, can you eliminate the source? Can you reduce the amount that you're using? Can you prevent it from reaching the water in the first place, or can you treat the source? So I'll wrap up super quick, like what you can do to like help with stormwater. You know, like eliminating the source, like don't put on the fertilizer if you really don't need it. Reducing the source, like, you know, using less salt. Picking up your pet waste, because your pet is not a natural, you know, contributor of animal poo to the environment. You know, preventing the source from reaching the water. So like, can you disconnect from impervious surfaces? So like the downspout disconnect. You guys had downspouts that went right into the storm drain, or is that Milwaukee thing?
We used to.
Used to?
Mostly.
Yeah, it was like Milwaukee and Shorewood definitely.
Yeah, Milwaukee's getting better though, there's.
We have
Yeah.
downspouts that go into the sanitary sewer system too, which you also really don't want.
Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's when we talk about like disconnecting, so instead of having the water going across a hard surface, can you put it on a green surface? And, you know, treating the source, like adding green spaces, you know, the benefits are like aesthetics and biodiversity. There's, you know, there's benefits to your mental health, your property value increases, you know, temperature control. And so they also, you know, can treat some like contaminants or can prevent them from discharging into the surface waters. What Wauwatosa and other municipalities can do, they can also eliminate the source, reduce the source, prevent the source from reaching the surface waters. And they do that through a variety of ways. A lot of the time, it's like adding infrastructure, changing up the infrastructure. We've talked about, you know, disconnecting from storm sewer, from sanitary sewer. I think you're talking about some stormwater controls. They are not cheap to design, to construct, to maintain. They take up a lot, they can take up a lot of space. So municipalities are doing a lot. And at my position at DNR, I'm gonna ask municipalities to do more and more. But what it means for you as like a resident, like everything that the municipality is doing to make the surface waters better, it costs time, it costs money, it costs effort. And some of the things that they can do to like this one, the limit your source, like using less salt, like that actually is gonna save them money. So there's some very easy things that normal everyday people can do to help out the city, because if we're not all working on it together, it's just gonna be a really, really challenging problem to fix. And I know I went way over, but I think we had some good conversations. So if you guys have any more questions for me, I'm all ears. I have a question for you. At least at the beginning, where I talk about stormwater and urban pollution and, you know, developments and cities are dirty, is anything like new information, or is, you know, the conversation about stormwater like getting out there now?
You may be preaching to the choir here.
Yeah, I didn't even know, I mean, obviously I'm how old, I never knew that stuff that goes down, it goes directly.
Yeah.
I never knew that.
I don't know when
I grew up in the city.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know when I figured it out. So I grew up in Racine, and I've seen these, like, don't discharge, don't dump. And I would never like discharge anything, but I never thought about like leaves, and I never thought about road salt, and I never like thought about like washing my car in the driveway.
I see people dumping like their dog poop down all the drains on the Menominee Parkway.
Oh,
Yeah.
Like, it's pretty regular that you see people do that.
And it wasn't until I was in graduate school for a master's degree in freshwater sciences that like we actually were taught about like any of this stuff. Like, it's just not taught in like our, at least where I went to school.
Well, the salt thing is getting to be more a mainstream understanding, I think.
I think the kids
At
are
least the
getting more
road
into it.
salt part of it, I don't know, you know, like the guy down the street who's putting piles of it all over his front lawn
You
or
just go
whatever,
sweep
but,
it up when he's not looking and then use
Yeah.
it later.
Yeah.
but I think the salt, like, that goes on the streets, I think people kinda knew that was getting to be a little much.
Milwaukee does that brining before they
Yeah.
think they have an ice storm, what is that compared to the salt? Is it less?
Yeah, so brine is a mixture of
Right.
salt and water, so it's like 21,
Yeah, something like that.
23% like salt, so it's way less. And so, yeah, if they can apply that to the street beforehand, it prevents ice from like forming, cause it's that chemical structure, it won't let the water form into ice.
So
It
is
also
that-
sticks kinda where you need it.
At one point, that was supposed to be a byproduct of cheese making. Is that still the case, or is this mixed up?
There's problems with that. First, economics, like, it's expensive. You know, if you're the cheese factory and you've got that brine,
Yeah.
that cheese brine, if you're doing like the areas around you, like, yeah, economics, it probably makes sense. But it's really heavy, so actually transporting that stuff, cause it's liquid, like, economics was probably the reason it's not getting used, cause
Okay.
it's expensive. But it's an organic material, so there's other things in there that we don't want in the waterways.
Right. I think too, the natural process where a lot of that's broken down in the stream. The bacteria that break it down need oxygen to breathe like we do, so they suck oxygen out of the river. So, there's a concern that in addition to making the water really toxic, which is bad for fish and aquatic life, you're also potentially like removing oxygen from the stream with something like a cheese brine or like a beet brine, which I know Appleton was using for a second.
There's a couple municipalities around here that use it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's really been well studied. I would be really concerned about adding too much organics to the river and whether that could cause some additional negative impacts.
It sounded nice, you know, on the surface.
Right,
It
sounded
does,
like
it
a
sounds
very
good.
Wisconsin thing, and then it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
I think if they wanna do their parking lot by the cheese company, I'd be okay with it.
Yeah.
I think another thing you hear sometimes that people don't realize is that, I mean, just because it's not like what they think of as a chemical or an oil or something industrial, that it can't be like a harmful spill, like really anything in
Yeah.
the right amount.
Too many
Yeah.
leaves.
Milk, yeah, like as you said,
Leaves,
but I
yeah.
mean, just
Yeah,
people
milk
don't
is an
think.
example we use a lot, like a
Yeah.
glass of milk, like that's, you know, you dump a glass of milk in a river, is that gonna kill everything? Like, no, I mean, don't do it, it's not good, but like, no. But if a tanker full of milk falls over, like, that's gonna cause some problems.
What was the recent one?
Butter.
Oh, there
Is that
was a
the big
butter
one?
spill.
Butters.
There was a fire at a butter factory.
Oh.
And it melted all the butter.
It went
Actually, the
everywhere.
reports from the firefighters was, like, yeah, I have a vivid imagination, right? But they were like knee deep in butter and like actually couldn't get
I mean, it's
upstairs
kind of
and like
funny, but
hold
awful,
like
right?
the equipment.
Probably
Yeah.
dangerous too.
That's
It's
Yeah.
probably
probably
slippery.
PFAS on the butter.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think most of it actually drained to sanitary sewer. So when we're talking about stormwater quality, that's, you know, it's good that it went to sanitary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think actually a lot of it like got to storm sewer. Like,
Thankfully.
I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of pounds of butter melted, but it was like 2% actually got to storm
But we
sewer.
did, I mean, I remember years ago, we had a fish kill because there was so many leaves, and it was kind of a natural thing, but I think there's just, there wasn't a lot of water moving, we had like a kind of a drought, and people were just dumping so many of their leaves in one of the creeks that we had a bit like a fish kill, cause the same like thing applies, like just like the,
Depletes oxygen.
yeah,
Yeah.
the oxygen just plummeted, and I think it was like the fall or the spring, there was some big change in temperature.
Decomposing materials too, will decompose and they will generate like bacteria. So they gotta smell it. It doesn't smell good, but we'll get calls where they think there is like gasoline spill, because there's a sheen on the water and that's biofilm. It's a bacteria that's there. So it's not good. Like these natural materials like can be pollutants. Yeah.
Anything in excess.
Back to like the sixties where they converted the KK River into,
Yeah.
you know, a cement basin, a concrete basin and everything, and now
Sluice.
it's even more, you know,
Taking it out.
and now they're taking that out, and how did that affect all of that? I mean, there was, eventually it was understood as, you know, it was harming the environment,
Right.
you know, rather than
Yeah, I
doing
mean-
what they intended it to do to begin with.
I think it was put in like for flood management, I think the idea at the time was like, let's get the water to drain as quickly as possible
Mhm.
away from this area, and you can even talk to the early MMSD engineers, but it just kind of sent the water downstream, and then they had to make that concrete, and then they made the next section concrete, and then the next, and then now, you know, that, the Kinnickinnick in particular is such a impervious watershed, it's so heavily developed, that when it rains, like I've been out there monitoring, and like 5 minutes after like a pretty good rain event, I mean, the river just comes up so quickly.
Mhm.
So we've had, you know, unfortunately, like, I think there's been now about 9 kids that have died in the KK over the last decade or so. And so there's, you know, that's one of the big reasons we're taking it out, is there's like kind of a public safety issue. And if you fall into that creek, which I have, although I've never really had a long ride, Dave Fowler at MMSD claimed to have had like a 10-block,
I believe
like
that.
a swim at one point. Cause if you get washed in, you can't like grab onto anything, so it's super dangerous, but the problem with the KK too is it's like, there's just so much there's so much stormwater runoff that goes into it, and the river's really flashy. And it gets, because there's no real way for groundwater to get in to cool it off, especially in the summer months, it's like a bathtub. So there's like not any cool groundwater kind of getting in there to keep the flow moving well and to deal with the temperature. So you just end up getting really hot water, and then with a lot of runoff, and then a lot of nuisance algae, and it's just, from an aquatic perspective, it's definitely our most challenged river. But, you know, it is exciting to see the concrete come out, like, there's a section downstream of 6 that the concrete's come out already. And like, we find, like, we do invertebrate surveys there, and within like a year and a half, we were finding like pretty decent invertebrates, and, and so, you know, I think that we're really excited about the future for the KK. But I mean, it's an incredibly expensive project. I think it's like close, I don't know, it was $1,200 a square foot to remove it, and now I think it's at like $1,800. But I mean, it's gonna be, incredibly expensive. I mean, Mystique just purchased 83 houses too.
Well, I was gonna say, that's a big part of it too, is
Yeah.
buying houses.
Yeah.
That's what they did in
Tosa,
all
yeah.
of Wauwatosa and
Yeah.
Menominee, is that whole, there was a whole neighborhood that they took
River
out.
Park, yeah, when I moved
Yeah.
here, that was still
Yeah,
there.
there was a
Yeah.
whole neighborhood that they took out, and then they took out all the dams. And I remember as like a teenager, or maybe early college, seeing the first big fish,
Mhm.
coming up all the way to Center Street, where the Center Street and the, Parkway. We were down there and you could see them, you could see their backs coming out of the water.
Yeah.
And
Pretty
this
exciting.
season, we saw a whole bunch,
Yeah.
and we saw them spawning, like you could
Mhm.
see like this
Yeah.
white cloud go
Mhm.
down.
Yeah, it was, I think 2014, they did the last, there were 6 or 7 kind of low flow dams between
Connections, yeah.
Swan
Yeah.
to 60th.
Yep.
Through Hoyt Park.
We finally got the last big concrete section out from near Miller Park to happen
Yes.
in right around then, like
There
maybe
was a big one
2018.
there that was holding everything. And now you see them all the way up to the Portland Avenue Bridge in Honey Creek.
I've seen them up to
3-foot
Menominee
salmon
Falls,
up
I've
there.
seen them up to Menominee Falls at like, until the falls in Menominee Falls.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They're getting pretty, but you know, the salmon have always, a couple of strong ones have always been able to make it up, but now they're coming up, like,
That's a lot.
tons of them are coming up, yeah.
Yeah.
We're seeing fish, I bumped into a bunch of fishermen the other day. Yeah, there's like fishermen that are starting to really hit the Menominee, like in that
There's a
north
lot
to
of
Mayfair
them.
section.
I don't know if you're afraid you didn't know.
Yeah, I know, that's, well, we can talk a little bit about that, but that is definitely a concern.
But if you just catch them on the mouth, pretty.
Maybe
So
we
do you
should
wanna
go.
hear about all the great things Wauwatosa
Yes,
is doing for
let's
us?
do it.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Talk about your leaf collection.
Let's do it. Let's do it. As Samantha mentioned, she holds the permit.
Yeah.
And
So
so
it's
this
not good
is
with the leaf collection.
kind of a unique situation that I get to sit here and brag about all we're doing. She has to sit here and listen. So this is just a few slides just to make sure I stay on point. But I will, does anybody know where I am there? Start with the quiz. Anyone? How do I get it on
That
this?
looks like between like north and center.
From beginning?
I've always hit
That-
that, oh yeah, that's fine.
Set by Western Lumber.
I was cross-country skiing. I am on
Is that the rail?
That's Menominee River Parkway above me. I'm
Oh.
standing on that bridge that goes through the Hanson Golf Course.
Yes. So you are looking east
Okay,
or
yes.
south, yeah.
South
So like
And that would be
east-ish.
just
to your
about down
back
by
is North
Western Lumber
Avenue?
where it turns.
Yeah.
To your back is North Avenue and you're
Yes.
looking southish.
And looking south. On my right was where there was a huge washout for many years,
Yeah,
that then
I
we
think that was
reestablished that whole
golf
bank
Yeah.
on the golf course there. In the winter. Beautiful river. So, I thought I'd talk specifically about our community and what we do in Wauwatosa. I am a civil engineer. I mostly focus in stormwater. I've worked for the city of Wauwatosa since 2012, so over 10 years. I'm also a Tosa resident and also love Waterways, so it's a good fit for me. And I'm just gonna talk about how our stormwater program tries to help manage these pollutants that enter surface water. Individuals can do things, but cities can do a lot more on a lot larger scale. So I'll go through what we do, and a lot of what we do is done because it's required by the DNR.
Well, you guys do it because you wanna do the right
But we
thing.
also do a lot of things. I think Wauwatosa does a little more than most of the communities in our area.
I can concur with that, and there are some communities that we need more residents like you guys to live in, to push for them to do more. Cause yeah, a lot of times it's the opposite, well, we don't wanna make our residents upset, so we're not gonna do X, Y, and Z, so.
So this is a quick Wauwatosa map. I think everybody here knows this. Everyone sounds pretty versed in our waterways, but the Menominee River is our main stem. Underwood Creek goes to the, you know, Fisher Woods, those neighborhoods over here. Underwood Creek the concrete was removed in 2015, I believe. Do people remember that? And they added
Part of it.
the riffles and yes, from like where it joins to about here, where the freeway goes, right about here.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna do the rest in the next 5 to 10 years.
Really?
It is in a feasibility study with the Army Corps of Engineers.
So like over about like 115 over.
Yeah.
Like that stretch, yeah.
Yep. Also in 30% further than a feasibility study, already into 30% design phase is all of Honey Creek concrete removal and a lot of bank stabilization. You've seen a lot of the
Yeah.
outfalls are falling in. There's a really bad washout area just south of the Portland Avenue Bridge on Honey Creek
Yeah.
that needs to be addressed. There will be.
Starkweather Creek in.
Madison?
It goes through the Highlands.
Schoonemecker.
Oh, that's.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I'm thinking
so
Madison.
that
Madison is.
is my last one here. That will be what
Oh, yeah.
Schoonemecker Creek will be the city's largest infrastructure project over the next 5 to 20 years. The creek itself has a lot of flow coming to it. All of the infrastructure in East Tosa is over 100 years old. So we are currently in the phase where we're hiring a consultant to look at the final 2 alternatives of how to handle the flow coming through Schoonemecker Creek. So.
Where is it on that map, please?
Sure,
This is it, right?
the blue line is the open portion.
It's the open part and then it kinda goes
But
kind
most
of
of it's
underneath like
completely
that.
underground. So, most of it's in the tube, cause it starts north of Center Street.
But the
Yes.
headwaters are kind of up here, and a lot of it was
It's
buried.
underground and
Oh.
kept.
Here is
Or
kind of the
up
edge of the
here.
It's like
watershed.
Like I
north
live
of
off
Pasadena
of Tosa, but I
Boulevard
think
by
my
like
area
about
too.
5 blocks, Cop Park.
Yeah.
It starts in Cop Park and it's all the way goes down, all the way down to like the Washington Highlands, and it pops out for a bit, goes back under, and then pops out right real close to the river.
Down at about 63rd, yep, yep. And then Grand Tosa Creek, which doesn't get much press, is this one up here.
Also needs some love.
It's one up here.
It's also
But it
concrete.
goes in and out of Wauwatosa and Milwaukee.
What's running through the green space there by Mayfair Road and Burleigh?
That's the golf course, that's Blue Mountain Country Club.
But what's the little water
Oh.
going through there?
They have kind of just a creek waterway
Like
through
a
the golf
man-made
course.
thing?
And that runs
It's
into,
natural.
it runs
Is
into
it?
the
Yeah.
Menominee
I was
River.
not really sure if it was stormwater or
There's a,
like a real creek.
The
It's almost like a little.
2 big culverts come under
where the
Mayfair
water
Road and
Oh, yeah,
just
there's
charge
the
into
pretty-
it.
is that
From
pretty
the golf
bridge,
course
right?
into Menominee it runs.
Oh.
If you walk along the river, you'll see where that arch is
Yeah,
and
yeah.
water runs through there. I just discovered that last year.
See, I've never been up on that golf course, so I don't know what all that.
I was on the riverside,
Yeah.
Menominee Riverside.
And my last point is all of these flow to Lake Michigan. So,
Mhm.
and then eventually drinking water comes from Lake Michigan. So what do we do to help? And these bullets are really key in on the permit we do carry with the state. And we do some pretty in-depth engineering analysis on how pollutants end up in the waterway and how the practices we do remove them. So there's this really detailed software system called WindSlam Modeling developed by Dr. Pitt.
I thought it was Bannerman.
He didn't develop, well,
Or
yeah, developed by
somebody.
someone that can model how the particulates are taken out of stormwater. So one way is street sweeping. So that's the biggest way that we currently do because we have so many miles of streets. And we have 2 street sweepers, and we typically only sweep at night, and we try to sweep every street 6 times a year. So, never when Cheryl wants.
Never when I want. I was on 67th for a long time, but now I'm on 58th. But, so I'm secretly in the Waterways. But I was a Tosa resident for a good decade.
But things we're trying to do, we know if we get a more regenerative air vacuum sweeper, the computer modeling tells us that we'll remove more pollutants that way. So, you know, that's one of our next steps, that we improve our street sweeping equipment. They are making electric street sweepers now that someone has seen at a, so that's a possibility of, the DNR does have grants for municipalities to purchase these street sweepers. So as we go into our next phase of buying a new one, we'll probably be reaching out for one of those grants. The other thing we do is clean all our catch basins. So the inlets she was showing with the grates on top, typically those have just a bottom and then your pipe comes out the bottom of your inlet. But if you sump or create a bucket almost at the bottom of those, you allow the water to sit in them before it goes out the pipe, and you're cleaning your water that way. So these are ways to get really small particulates out of water. You need to let it to sit still and let it settle out, and then the water that rushes off is cleaner. So we now have about 1,400 catch basins in our city. Instead of the flat bottom with the pipe, there's a sump under it where particulate can settle out. So we keep installing those.
Actually go and like clean those out? Or do
And
they
then
just
we
fill
clean
out
them
those?
every other year. So there's 3 feet, it's 3 feet down, section like that.
Do you clean all 1,400 every other year?
We clean 700 a year,
And then where does all that stuff go?
landfill.
Orchard Ridge?
I don't know.
Do you know where?
Because it's a hazardous waste.
It's a hazardous waste.
Well, part of Orchard Ridge is hazardous though, right? I think they can take some. I'm curious.
I probably have the info.
I know River Hills sometimes just takes it and dumps it on the lot behind their city hall. Sorry, continue.
Yeah, cause streets are dirty, they've got stuff like
Very
oil
dirty.
and grease and heavy metals, right, so that stuff is toxic, even though it's not like super toxic, it's still toxic, it's a low hazardous waste.
Cheryl,
And so you can't just
are you
pick it up and
officially
throw it somewhere.
letting her know that it's a problem?
No, I haven't checked, I mean, it was a couple of years ago, so I actually, cause we were getting like huge like sediment plumes on the river, and we walked the whole river, and it was like coming from River Hills.
Well, they had an illicit connection that
Yeah,
has been disconnected recently.
yeah,
so
they
I'm
might
sure-
have fixed it.
Do you sample it or is it just profiled a certain way?
Oh,
Yeah,
The
the
stuff
stuff.
The stuff we do not sample it, as far as I'm aware of, yeah. We don't not
If you just take it to a licensed landfill, if you wanted to not take it there, you could test it and basically show that it's not hazardous, but people just take it to a
So
licensed
there
landfill.
has to be lots of grass and leaves that blow into those or wash into those. Does that decompose in there and then become less of a problem?
I guess technically, but there's just only so much space.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, because then we're eventually just cleaning all that out.
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, versus, like, daily cover sometimes at a landfill is, you know, cheaper than direct landfill, or sometimes biopile, this wouldn't be appropriate for that, so that's
Yeah.
not why I
I
was.
think, I mean, I think that's really excellent. I mean, I don't know about Milwaukee, but I suspect, just as someone who have done a lot of testing of stormwater systems, like we did rain gardens, so we would do like before and after the rain garden, and we pop manholes, and we actually do some tests at the end of the pipe and in the system. Like, and because of like the way the parking regulations are, where in some cases, like in the Kinnickinnick in particular, they don't do every other side parking. So like people are always parked on both sides, so the city can't get in there to clean those
So
sumps.
we have no parking overnight.
Right, and so it's been an issue, but like I've like gone before we were doing this BMP project years ago, trying to monitor the impact of doing all these BMPs, these rain gardens. And there's like there's probably 4 or 5 feet of dirt in the drains.
Another big issue with street sweeping, so, a lot of the stuff, a lot of the dirt, grime, whatever, is gonna go to the curb line, like your leaves are gonna go to the curb line, and so you should be street sweeping that curb line to pick up where the stuff is. And sometimes these catch basins, these sumps will fill really fast because street sweeping, I don't know, it's just like a new person and they're just going like right down the middle, they're not actually getting to the curb line, so
It's important to get to the curb line.
yeah.
Which is a great reason why we do it at night, when
Yeah.
we know you can't be parked on the street.
Yeah.
So, always go all the way to the curb.
It's good, because I've got a really awkward conversation with somebody else who doesn't go all the way to the curb.
I guess my thing, well, when I mentioned the timing thing before, and I'll throw Milwaukee under the bus as a current Milwaukeean, but like, you know, like, I think often they'll go out when it's raining, because, you know, it's easy, cause they have to like put water in a lot of the older trucks, and maybe the newer trucks, right?
Yeah.
So like, cause like right now, if you drive around, well, I should say, before, when I just came back from DC, but like, you know, there was like so much dirt in the roads, right, when all the snow melted, and like just trash, and it's like, this is when like people should be going out street sweeping, cause there's just so much junk on the roads.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of times, I shouldn't even just like be just mean to Milwaukee, but they'll wait till like after a rain event when a lot of that stuff's already washed into the river, or like when it is actively raining, they'll go out, and because it's a lot easier to sweep when it's raining. And I'm always like, like it'd just be really nice if the sweeping happened before you got a big snow or before you got a big rain event, because so much of that stuff will wash in.
So do the street sweepers like suck this up? Is there a big vacuum on it at the same time they're going through there? And so when you see like 10 rows of, is that like water that hasn't evaporated yet? If you see a street that looks like it's been recently.
Sometimes when you see that, that is the brine.
Mhm.
We also brine before, so I think when you see that, it looks like a spray,
Yeah.
it's when they put the brine
That's
down.
right.
I do
Looks
think
like
sometimes
stripes, yeah.
street sweepers,
That's
you
the
see,
brine.
you see a little bit of liquid.
You see a little bit of liquid
Yeah,
left
so if
over,
it's summertime, there's no reason
Well,
for us
when
to be putting
you have
salt
these
down.
big brushes that are spinning around, they're
They
spraying
leave
some
that.
water in there to keep the dust off,
Right.
too.
Yeah, so street sweeping, I think residents like it because it also keeps our street clean, but it also really helps with our water quality as well. I put in leaf pickup, but the absolute best thing we could do as a city for stormwater would be to not do any leaf pickup. So it would also save us a ton of money and headache, and leaf pickup is extremely hard for our public works department.
If you're not aware of it, Toro makes a vacuum mulcher that puts it in a bag and then you can spread it around your yard.
Yeah.
And it takes it from about, I would have to say it's almost 10 to 1 size reduction.
Wow.
I steal all those leaves from the street and I put them all in my gardens to cover my gardens for the
Yeah.
winter time.
Yeah.
My
Set 'em
mom
all.
always did that, and so I do that.
Yeah.
And
I
by
have
the time the
about,
winter's over, they all kind of compacted down,
Yep.
and then everything just grows up out of there.
my raised bed gardens are about that high full
Yeah.
of leaves right now.
Yeah.
Who would we contact in the city to say, we
Yeah.
don't want leaf
We
pickup
don't
anymore?
want leaf pickup. Contact your alders.
Okay.
You can come to community affairs
Yeah,
meetings,
I don't know that.
are a good one, or government affairs meetings, but, I would say we are progressive about so many things in Wauwatosa, but when we talk about our leaf program, people do not wanna talk about stopping our leaf, or thinking about the resistance. And I'll say, I live on a lot where I can easily handle the leaves on my lot. There's lots in Wauwatosa where people have, 20 trees and there's nowhere to go, and we also have the difference, we've also started talking about, should we be treating leaf pickup differently on the east side from the west side where there's no sidewalks? Because if we tell people, one way we can achieve a better standing kind of with the DNR is if we don't pick up from the street. And we've looked at pilot programs where we get a vacuum where we pick up the leaves from the terrace instead of the street, because when it's in the street, it's in the gutter, and if it rains, the event we had this fall when the leaves were complete, it was like peak time when all the leaves were in the street and we had like 1.5 inches of rain, was just awful.
This had to have been like the worst.
Yeah.
Fall for leaf collection.
Yeah, so but we also have blocks and blocks in East Tosa with a 3-foot terrace, and people have, a 50-foot elm tree, and we're gonna tell them, make sure to store your leaves on your terrace, it's just not.
You're talking about the area between the sidewalk and the street?
Yeah, that's a big.
I always call that a boulevard.
Okay.
Well, some people call it parkways, some people call it
Median.
right-of-ways.
But in
Well, but
West
the
Tosa
idea,
where there's
though-
no sidewalk and there's
Or if you
50-foot
do
front
have
lawns.
enough, if you do have enough, if you can't, then you can't, but everybody in West Tulsa who has no sidewalk, and like in front of my house, there's a nice big boulevard, in front of Pasadena where my mom lived, there was a nice big boulevard. They could leave it on the boulevard in most of the city.
Mhm.
Just probably the really oldest parts probably have the skinniest boulevards, right?
And so we've talked with our, it's on us to do better with communications. Feels like, you know, the first step is making sure everybody knows, if you wanna help, here's something simple, before it comes straight to no leaves on the street ever, you know, no one's quite there yet, but.
After, oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead, what?
Oh, after I talked to Sam this fall about this event, and I didn't know,
Yeah.
and I've never, this was like my first fall as a homeowner, so I was like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm gonna like go rake my leaves. And then she was telling me about this, I was like, well, we can't do this.
Don't put leaves on the street.
So I was like, all right, we're not doing it, and so I didn't, and we like had them spread out over the grass, and we were gonna mulch them. And, but we have a baby, so we got distracted, went inside. The next day, one of my neighbors apparently thought it looked really bad and raked them all out to the street. And I'm sure they thought they were doing us a favor, but we were like super irritated.
Oh my god.
And then we like would mention it, like, oh yeah, we're gonna like mulch all the leaves, they don't like cause, and then people were like, oh, we're like the weird ones on the street. But we tried, Sam scared me, and I was like, oh, I gotta do this.
But you know, no mow May, I feel like everybody has heard
Yeah.
of now,
So like,
if there's
no
no
rake
reason
it fall.
behind it. I think the messaging around mulching your own leaves is there, but the other one, I'll skip ahead. Does this look familiar to anyone in this room?
Yes,
Yeah,
Okay, so do you check this?
yes,
You do?
I do.
and I called in when it wasn't working right,
Uh-oh, good, thank you.
but it got
Alright.
fixed.
But it got fixed, okay. I think we have an excellent GIS manager. I use this, I tell all my friends about it, it at least helps. It's not, when I took the screenshot, it's not active, but it is very kept up, that the trucks were here yesterday. There's no reason to rake your leaves out into the street if it's not coming for another 2.5 weeks.
It is a little bit not intuitive, is to clicking on something to expand the box to be able to read the details.
Okay, are you doing it on a phone or a laptop?
I've done it both ways, it
Okay.
doesn't work well on a phone.
Yeah,
It works much better on a
on
laptop.
a laptop, I
Or
noticed that too, yeah.
a monitor, yeah.
Yeah, so the hope with this is that, people know when it's coming and know when to rake out into the street. Another, idea that, yes,
How do you advertise this to your, residents?
are with our Facebook pages
Okay.
and, yeah.
I would have to say
I
that
don't
nobody
know about
knows
that.
the
At least some of
idea
them
that
do.
you're supposed to put the
Yeah.
leaves out just before the pickup.
Nobody knows that.
No.
Okay.
It's always, you better get them out no later than this date, and
That's,
everybody's doing
that's
it
the
as soon as
messaging,
possible.
you're right, you're right.
I don't think anybody knows that. Well,
It's always
most
just,
people
don't miss your leaf date,
Right.
yeah, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just people just as they are, as
Yeah.
they're raking, they have time, they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, it's a nice day out.
Or you add to your neighbor's pile.
Yeah.
You could put
In
this.
front of their house.
You could put this link on those newsletter blasts, like
Right.
the neighborhood association news blast thing.
From the
Do you
neck.
do that? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
Do you do that?
Yeah, I will say in the last probably 3 years, our communications department has beefed up a bit. We now
Because I utilize that news blast thing for
have other,
everything.
yeah, and they're a little bit, they also know the city has their own channels, so they
Yeah.
don't want us
Thank
dumping
you.
all of our stuff into
Would you do it?
No,
Oh,
I'm
the
just on the
newsletters.
next board.
Oh, yeah, I use it
Um,
all the time for everything.
But we've definitely talked with our communications team about, more advertisement of this.
Well, everyone's looking for when it starts, right?
Yeah.
Like they look for those posts, so if you could combine, you know, definitely.
And what can I
combine
put in there? Can I put my pumpkins in there? Can I put my, I mean, it's just, it's
How
a
big
hot
is-
topic.
How big are sticks?
Yeah, yeah, how, so, yeah, we think, if, that's good to hear though, if people don't know that sitting in the street is contributing to phosphorus buildup in the river.
I didn't know.
So,
Yeah.
just
You can smell
a
it.
clarification on leaves being put in the street.
Mm-hmm,
Everybody seems to pile them right up to the curb,
mm-hmm.
and then the water's not going to flow.
No, that's what I said before, you gotta move them
I mean,
Yeah.
well, I always try to push them out, and,
a little bit.
well, I try to leave a foot or two,
Yeah.
Yeah.
good.
and I don't think that most people know that.
Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if people would do that, because then you're like, some of the streets are kind of narrow anyway, especially if cars are parked. So then if you're pushing the leaves
Who
way
needs
out
a
there-
car?
Like, but I also don't
In
like,
my dreams.
I'm always afraid of parking a car on top of the leaves.
Right.
I'm always thinking it's gonna set a car on
You
fire.
could,
Yeah.
We always have in those.
Right?
If
Yeah,
you-
there's like sticks or weird things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I will go back to,
Even they will.
the other things we're doing as a city is installing green infrastructure. Have people heard this term?
Impervious, yeah, alleys and.
Yeah, and so the idea with green infrastructure
Impervious, I
is
should say.
mostly about removing pollutants from stormwater. It's not necessarily a flood control practice, it's for these smaller rain events that really cause pollutant buildup in the river. So, as a city, we're doing permeable pavers and alleys. You may have seen around town, I think we have about 25 of these now. Anytime we're doing a city parking lot, we're looking at ways to put green infrastructure in. So we have, fire station on Underwood has a very degraded parking lot that is porous asphalt, it needs to be replaced. The new police station parking lot is all porous asphalt, rainwater goes right through that. All of Hart Park parking lots are porous asphalt, those were installed in 2006, they might not be performing as well as they used to. The 69th Street Center next to Rocket Baby, all of those pavers are permeable, water moves through them. So the idea, MMSD is always pushing managing water where it falls. Let the water move in, let the water slow down, move through stone or grass systems that clean the water.
Is there a maintenance program for those? Cause I know. Did you take?
Are they getting clogged up with sediment or?
They
what?
are getting clogged with sediment quickly because we have trees over them, we have people with mulch right next to them. So we are trying to keep up. They're still, we're checking on them regularly. They are working. We have this little thing is an observation well where you can pull it off and see how quickly it's filling up and draining out. They have spots though that it's clogged between the pavers and the water's moving right over that spot, but then it's getting in at the next spot. So they are on a cycle for maintenance.
How do you clean them?
You clean them 6 times a year. We vacuum them with our vacuum sweeper. So we make sure that we're trying to suck up anything that's on the top. So in
No
between them
back-
is this.
No back flushing or anything like that, it's just
But
sucking.
3 times or every 3rd year, we're taking a power washer to them and but what you don't wanna do is power wash down into them and force that sediment down.
You'd rather
So we're
come
trying to
back.
push sediment out.
Okay.
And then on a 10-year cycle, which seems like it needs to be shorter than that, we're taking them out and then resetting them and re-chipping them.
Oh,
Yeah,
boy.
I know, it's a lot of work.
Yep.
Yeah.
So as she mentioned, green infrastructure is expensive to maintain. I will mention that these were 100% funded by the sewerage district. There's a program called Green Solutions. This has been a really effective way for the city to repair our alleys because everything you see here except the 3 feet of concrete is paid for by a grant through the MMSD. So,
They look nice.
They do look very nice. Are the concrete on the sides so that theoretically tires go on the concrete and not on those bricks?
no, it's just to have a border to the sub-base system. So the water's moving through that, there's 3 feet of stone underneath there. And on many alleys, like this one, there's a garage there. We don't want a garage we're less worried about, it's a slab on grade, but we don't wanna be cutting down 5 feet and infiltrating water adjacent to structures.
Okay.
So the concrete borders are really about staying off of structures and off edge of the right of way.
The water's mostly sheeting to the center too, right? I mean,
Yeah, these areas that drain to these alleys are pretty small, where we also do a calculation. The width of that paver is based on how much runoff is coming to it, so we size them for just how much water is coming to it.
And the school district is putting these in too.
School district is doing pavers and mostly porous asphalt. So the difference between, the pavers, the water moves through the joints. The paver itself is still a solid paver, and asphalt, porous asphalt, the water moves through the actual asphalt. So school district parking lots, Longfellow, Wauwatosa West, maybe that's it. And the parking lanes in front of Eisenhower, or Whitman. have
But
porous
with the
asphalt.
porous pavement, doesn't like maybe ice, like kind of wreak havoc on that then? Because if it's porous and the water goes through and then there's a freeze, doesn't that just crumble it or what?
Well, the idea is to never let the water stop moving on porous pavement. So if it freezes on top, no problem. If as it moves, if it becomes clogged, then you could get degradation of those pavers. But if the water's moving through, then you're never gonna see, usually pavers that aren't porous, they rot from the bottom up. They kind of, like the ones on North Avenue that have crumbled over time, or they're rotting from the bottom up because water's getting under them and freeze thaw. So in these systems, water's moving through. We, you know, on every job, we ask for 10% stock of the pavers to replace them. We haven't replaced any pavers since 2015. None of them are crumbling, none of them are, they're settling next to the concrete.
Yeah.
So we're not, then the plows aren't hitting them. Everyone was worried about the plows chipping them, but the blades are running on top of them. So we haven't had any paver issues.
But the porous pavement,
The pavement,
yeah,
Like the
like the
asphalt?
top one says
Yeah,
part porous
yes.
pavement. And I
Like the
don't think
asphalt.
I know. What does the porous pavement look like? I
looks
don't
the
know,
same
it
as
looks like
regular.
normal
Yeah,
pavement.
looks like asphalt.
Yeah, I don't have a picture of
Oh,
it.
but the water just goes through.
It just goes right through
That's
it.
what I'm talking about though, the porous
Yeah.
pavement, but the water doesn't go down and like freeze in there and then crackle it
Not
out.
if you keep it draining.
Right, if the
Okay.
pores are clogged and
Yeah,
then the water
alright.
sits on top and then the water
Yeah.
can freeze, then yeah, but if you're maintaining your porous pavement, you're cleaning it, then all the water should just always be going through, so it doesn't have time to freeze.
Is porous pavement something that a homeowner could install, like if you had to put in a new
Yes.
driveway?
And we do have people
Yeah.
put in driveways with porous pavers usually.
Okay.
The big thing is, on all of these, we have a small 6-inch pipe with perforated sides at the bottom, because just what you're talking, we never want water just sitting, we always
Right.
want an eventual. So for a homeowner to also install that piping and connect that piping to the storm sewer can get expensive. But when we do one of these green alleys, we always reach out to all the homeowners in case, typically an alley driveway is just a 5-foot apron, it's not much of a driveway. But in case they do want to connect to the system, we've had one homeowner do that, install porous pavers on their drive approach too. I
I
think he was
wonder
an
how hard
engineer.
that would be though, again, in like East Tosa, the houses are so close.
I
So
know.
the driveways are so close to
They're
like
so
the actual
long.
foundations.
Yeah.
And then like, how would you be able to,
Yeah, I
if
don't
you have
know.
to dig down and make it so that the water can go down appropriately? I
Yeah,
don't know
it'd
if
be
you could
hard.
do that without like, risking cracks in the foundations.
Yeah. It's too bad, cause they're so long, those driveways.
Mhm.
It's a
A
lot
lot
of
of
pavement.
opportunity.
But maybe if you could do a chunk of it,
Mhm.
like from the part from like the house to the street, where you're not, gonna affect the
Yeah,
foundations.
Yeah,
it'd be nice.
yeah. We'd love to see it, yeah.
We do only have about 10, maybe 15 more minutes. Is
Okay.
that okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think I can,
Cheryl talks fast.
Cheryl. I had in here, in case we had any business owners show up, but also so you are all aware of what we regulate with, developments or businesses when they come in. I had on here for parking lots, our development team does do a really good job of promoting green infrastructure to developers that come in to Wauwatosa. We can only do what our ordinance requires, but there's always grant programs available that we make them aware of. So we do have a lot of developments that do green infrastructure practices, usually the porous pavement or what we call biofiltration, when you see like their little parking lot islands that have native plants growing. We get a lot of those. We ask people to cover their dumpsters, that's a big one. Existing dumpsters, we don't have a lot of enforcement on. New ones, we do have more enforcement on making sure they're curbed, making sure they don't jump straight into a storm drain. We want to get to making them covered, we don't have that yet. And then construction here at the end, not allowing loose dirt to enter the storm sewer system. So like we talked about erosion control permits. If a site is over an acre, which is pretty rare in Wauwatosa, honestly, but we do probably have between like 7 and 10 developments that are 1 to 5 acres in size. They're more strictly regulated with regular maintenance check-ins by our engineering department, who are our licensed erosion control inspectors, to make sure they're doing what they're supposed to be doing for construction. That's another thing that's if you see it, say it. If you see long trails of clotted dirt coming out of a construction site, call in. We usually do hear about those, but if you see that, call in. Homeowners, rain barrels, rain gardens, and more trees, I think are the easiest things to do on your lots. MMSD for the past few summers has run a green summers in Tosa. People heard about where they will site. It is important. We have found if someone comes to site someone's rain barrel, it's way more realistic that they actually use it and keep using it. A lot of people put them in the wrong spot. They put them at the bottom of their yard and their garden's at the top of their yard, and they realize they have to like pump it up there or haul the water. So having someone site a rain barrel for you is really helpful. We've talked about, do people think we should have a rain barrel pickup available for homeowners at our public works yard? This is always a question that's come up with us.
What do you mean, like, so in case if we want a new one or a?
Yeah,
or
if
a
people wanted a rain barrel, we could do programming through MMSD to buy cheaper rain barrels, so that someone could come by the public works yard and pick up a rain barrel, instead of having to buy it at Lowe's or buy it at.
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but then how do we get somebody to come out on site too?
Right, then it's even better if we could.
Cause
get
I think my
somebody
rain
to
barrel is kind of, it doesn't
Not in the
work the way
right
I
spot.
want it to work.
Yeah.
It has to be high enough.
Yeah. Yeah, so we've talked about ways, using interns to get the rain barrel program going again, scoop the poop. One thing when, Samantha was talking about lawns, there's a program through UW where you can get your soil tested, if anyone's ever done that, and that can give you an idea about what kind of fertilizer to use. You can use less or no fertilizer.
Extension, right?
UW Extension, yeah.
Gary's
So,
on that.
that's always one week out, and then I think we talked about salt. Just a few, and then this is my last one, the few things we're doing in, coming up. We just had our 5-year capital improvement program approved, 2023 through 2027. This year on North Avenue, as you've all seen it torn up from Highway 100 to about 100th Street. We're putting in there's 32 of these stormwater boxes where we're planting the trees back, and we're doing some porous pavement in the parking lanes only. We're still not ready to put pavers or permeable pavement under bus lanes or delivery truck lanes, but we are doing parking lanes there. We're doing 2 more green alleys this year, and then we're really excited about the 116th Street Park, where we're trying to do some restored wetlands, which is something we never get to do in Wauwatosa.
Cool.
So that's under design this year.
Where's the 116th and what?
That's the public works yard.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
over.
yeah.
The west half of that is
Oh.
becoming a new city park.
Cool.
Yeah, through ARPA funding.
That was cool.
I just got in a Facebook fight
American
over this
Rescue.
picture.
Yeah.
Somebody called the huge basin on Swan Boulevard a boondoggle, and I took offense.
The huge basin on, like the ponds?
Yeah, that big,
Yeah.
Swan Boulevard goes right over that 2-mile, it's like a 2-mile
Oh, the
thing
detention
with the
basin.
poles
Yeah.
on either
Yeah.
side, and he said it was a useless boondoggle that's never been utilized.
I think it's
Uh,
only
I'm like,
actually
that's
filled
kind of-
once or twice,
I-
The
but.
freaking point is it's not supposed to be.
Do you wanna,
It's a-
do you wanna,
management
do you
basin.
wanna
Yeah.
know how it works and how to educate people
I
about
know
it?
how it
I
works.
Give me
would,
5 minutes.
I would, cause I do, yeah, I would
Yeah.
like to know.
So the ponds were installed to help with
I'm not gonna be able to talk.
flood control. Sorry, I'm cutting. There is a large grate, it is.
It has only filled up twice, I think, since they built
It's-
it.
Well, I saw
not
the
supposed to
impact
fill up.
from the,
Oh,
all the
okay.
dump trucks, oh my
The
god.
grate is, the grate is,
Out further, I think, no? No, yeah, you're right.
You see
Oh,
where
yeah.
Swan
the
Boulevard
grate is
is?
here.
Yeah.
And it tunnels to here.
Yeah.
And the creek has to get to a certain level It's a
Pretty high.
large, flat grate, the creek gets to a certain level and spills over and goes through that grate and through that tunnel and starts filling the ponds.
Yeah.
Anything under a 10-year event, it will not do that. So a 10-year event is, I think, 5.3 inches over 24 hours. It is a ton of rain. It is not something we have had since the 2010 storms, July 22nd, July 26th, and 2010. We've had short, intense storms that we've called 100-year storms, but they've been over an hour. So those ponds are to fill when you get at least that long duration, high flow storm, and then they will completely fill when that 100-year storm comes.
Right.
And really reduce, they have heavily reduced the floodplain level of our river through the village and through Hart Park. So it was a part of, when they took the whole neighborhood down in Hart Park, they also needed to install these ponds to get the flow to come down. So they are not supposed to fill. They just aren't. They're working.
It does drain back to the river too in the downstream section, or I mean, it not because, but they haven't really worked very often, so that whole, like if you walk down,
right.
if you walk downstream of the Hoyt pedestrian bridge, you see that
It's like
whole
right here.
structure, which is where it's supposed to drain to, and it's all like, it's like plants now and dirt.
And then this is actually considered a dam, the way it's built.
Yeah.
This is a permitted dam with
But I think
DNR.
eventually, like if it did fill, it would go back to the river that way, but it hasn't.
Yes, that's the
Right,
outfall.
it hasn't, so it's just all
Controlled
full of
Controlled
vegetation
outfall.
and
So
stuff.
the idea of it is
Yeah.
let the water come over here and sit, and we'll slowly release it back into the river when the storm event is passed.
And a concrete example of that working should be, like, the train trestle that goes over, like, Hoyt Park, it goes right where you go into Hoyt Park, that train trestle, where they've got that thing,
That's it.
That's
the
it.
measuring thing. It should never get to the point where that water's going up practically to the bottom of the train trestle, right? Like,
Right.
that's not supposed to fill up anymore.
Not that high. It would never fill up as high as the railroad tracks.
Right.
Right.
And I remember times when it was as high as, you know, damn near touching the bottom of the.
Before the ponds.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like when I was a kid.
We really need to let Cheryl say something.
Yeah,
We are really
well, I'll
running out
just
of
be
time.
really fast, cause we're already kind of at time, but, yeah. Well, have you guys heard of Riverkeeper before?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So, check. So we actually started as Friends of the Menominee River, which I think a lot of people know, in 1995. And our first office was like on State Street next to the outpost. But we really was a group of Tosa residents who started our organization, who were sick of the rivers being full of trash, and were really upset about the concrete channels. And one of our first projects was removing one of the main kind of little dams or drop structures off of 45th Street on the Menominee, just west of Miller Brewery. And but it was really people coming together to do cleanups, and it started in 1995. And our mission now is to basically, protect water quality and wildlife habitat in the Milwaukee River Basin. And so working for clean, fishable, swimmable, drinkable water. And so we have kind of 4 different parts of our mission really quickly. We call Protect, Restore, Connect, Advocate. So our Protect mission is really, protecting the river. We do proactive monitoring. We have about 110 community members that go out and test water monthly for a whole variety of chemical and biological indicators. We also do road salt monitoring. We do emerging contaminant monitoring. And we're looking for 65 different pharmaceuticals and personal care products about 3 times a year. And doing some muscle monitoring and other things as well. We do have a training coming up if you're interested in doing monitoring, and we are looking for someone maybe to do Schoonamaker. Or Schoonamaker, tomato. But we have a training coming up the first Saturday of May, for whatever that day is, and it's normally up at River Edge Nature Center, but we can also do kind of like more localized trainings and smaller trainings. So that's a big part of what we do, and we really use the science to help inform our advocacy and the work that we do as an organization. So that is a big part of our Protect mission. We do permit review, so I personally review anybody who's discharging to the river and looking for a permit with DNR. I review those permits. Some of them kind of sometimes pass me by, but we also review construction permits of anybody who's constructing adjacent to the river, which is often called a Chapter 30 permit. Anyone looking to do any kind of filling or anything like that into the river or into like an adjacent wetland. We'll generally review those permits. We also just we have a patrol boat. We rely on citizens and community members and volunteers to let us know if you see something that's a problem. And I respond to probably a couple hundred of those a year, just people calling in, something doesn't look right, smell right. Like, I'll call Maggie, I forward it to Maggie, I'll call Sam, and I think it's hard for a lot of community members to know who's the right person to call, even in Tosa, or the city of Milwaukee is even worse. There's a lot of people who work at the city of Milwaukee, so feel free to call me if you ever have any concerns, and we can try to figure out who is the best person to talk to. But we monitor stormwater BMP, so we talked, I think, about that earlier. If you see those clods of dirt or a lot of big plume of dirt coming into the river, let us know. We did find, I think in Tosa, I think it was Tosa or Milwaukee a couple of years ago. Well, no, we had a volunteer and there was a water main break. So sometimes if you see a lot of heavy discharge into a creek, I think it might have been Grand Tosa, that could be that there's another problem or something, especially if it's dry. Yay, plows. All right, so we do a lot of protection work, we do restoration, we do we advocate for dam removals. We're working on on 2 right now. We do river cleanup, so the big cleanup is April 22nd, which is the Saturday. She'll be I don't know what the number is, but we've been doing them since 1995. We also have an adaptive river program. We have about 180 groups now that are going out and testing or cleaning up the rivers 2 to 4 times a year in addition to the spring cleanup. With churches, schools, businesses, things like that. We're hoping to start using some of those groups too to do more invasive removal, because there's just such a huge need. So we're trying to do a little bit more of that, a little bit more tree planting as well. Let's see what else. So we have a lot of fun paddle events. So if you follow us on social media or we're on all of the social medias, you can also sign up. We have something called Riverkeeper News. If you go to our website, which is MilwaukeeRiverkeeper.org, you can sign up for that, and it's an email. It goes out every 2 weeks, and it talks about news, things that are happening, events, ways that you guys can get involved in the community. We also do advocacy, which I mentioned before is a big part of my job. We do quite a lot of federal, state, and local advocacy around policy. I literally just got back from DC, where I met with 7 people this morning, both of our senators and quite a few of the representatives, about our Great Lakes Restoration Act, which is very important, and funding this $450 million cleanup of the AOC that we're hoping to get pushed here through 2030, which is really cleaning up the lower 12 miles of all 3 rivers. In the Menominee, it's largely 25th Street down where most of the sediment work is happening, but I would say there's really a lot of habitat restoration work that's envisioned for the whole Menominee corridor, really starting around the county grounds and going upstream. There's gonna be quite a lot of funding put into restoration in some of those areas, which we're really excited about, and some of that work will be 100% funded by the federal government. And we'll need a lot of help from residents too. I feel like one of my things and goals for the Menominee is we have a lot of great friends groups, like Friends of Honey Creek are amazing. They've been taking out a ton of invasives. There's obviously Jacobus Park Friends, Hart Park Friends, but Hoyt Park Friends. But there's not a lot of folks working between the parkways and the river, which is an area I'm walking a lot. And so and then upstream, I feel like we really don't have as many park groups North Avenue North. So I would really love to see a lot more community groups engaged in doing that work. And also with this AOC work, we're gonna be spending probably $450 million in these rivers until between now and 2030. And if invasives, if we don't maintain this stuff, it's gonna all come back. So, and functionally, our governments can only do so much. County parks, don't get me going. They've got a lot of challenges. They're all good people, but they've got a lot of really serious fiscal challenges. And so, it's really gonna be us. We're gonna really need to step up and help maintain a lot of this work going forward. So I was gonna talk a little bit about the book, but I will say a lot of what we were talking about today was PFAS, which is like when you read that book about all the contaminants, right? That they basically just contaminated a drinking water supply in the town and no one knew until really bad stuff started happening. And reading that, I was like, well, this is kind of my day-to-day job. I understand why they called me. But I mean, but you know, like we have PFAS now, we're finding it in 100% of our water samples, we're finding it in our fish, we're finding it in our sediment. West Bend just had to shut a well down. I remember for years Milwaukee's been testing for it, and I was like, what about West Bend, what about Grafton, what about Cedarburg? Because they all use these chemicals that we know are really toxic, and we're starting to find them unfortunately now. And
Well, they knew 30 years ago.
well, they
40
knew 30 years ago or 50 years ago, and EPA just missed a March deadline to get national PFAS standards put through, and that goes back to the Safe Drinking Water Act thing I mentioned before. So we talked a lot with them about, you know, we need better standards for these chemicals. You know, lead too, we've been really, like, and I have lead water pipes. You guys still have some lead pipes, I think, in Tosa, or no?
Yeah.
Surface, yeah. So, I mean, I know, like, Milwaukee, with their current schedule, it's gonna take 70 years to replace all the lead water pipes, and it's just not acceptable. And there's been a lot of really good funding of late, but it's still a proverbial, like, drop in the bucket. We're asking for like $5 billion, basically, for the clean water and drinking water kind of sewer programs nationally. But I think the need in just the Great Lakes states is like around $200 billion, just on the lead pipe issue alone. So there's a huge infrastructure need, and we can't just let Congress get away with this like bipartisan infrastructure law and call it a day. It's great, it was a huge, and you know, $50 billion is nothing to sneeze at. But I mean, we have a huge need, and you know, and lead is getting into people's drinking water. Newburgh has got really high nitrate levels. They have a halftime village manager who called a couple months ago, like, oh, where is this coming from? Well, it's coming probably from manure, and it's getting into their city well. And if you have high levels of nitrate, it can cause blue baby syndrome, it can kill kids, it can, you know, cause lots of other issues. So, I mean, it's for real out there. I mean, there's a lot of, you know, this is why we do the work that we all do. It's like, we need to protect our drinking water supplies. And a lot of the way, once the water's contaminated, it's very expensive to clean it up, which we're finding out with $450 million dredging project. No one wants to spend that kind of money on sucking dirt up out of the bottom of the river, but it is a generational opportunity to clean up these rivers. We'll never get this funding again. I mean, even the city is having to pay to, you know, dispose of the sediment. Like Brookfield was dredging some of their stormwater ponds, and it's very expensive to dispose of the sediment coming out of the ponds as well. And you know, we need to just try to stop getting those pollutants into the water, because once it's in there, it's very hard to remove. And the best thing we can do is really minimizing the source of all of these chemicals. So, you know, thinking as a consumer, how do I buy things? Or how am I more savvy with what I buy? Please, like, try to stop buying so much single-use plastic. It's like, I feel 85% of the stuff we pull out of the river is plastic. The petroleum companies have already told us, with all of the new renewable energy stuff happening, that you know, if they are selling less oil and gas to us because we have more electric cars and more renewable energy, they're just gonna start putting more of this stuff into plastic, which is already kind of a scourge on the earth, you know, and we're all eating like a credit card size amount of plastic a week, they're saying now. So, you know, I think we can all be more savvy consumers. I think, you know, talking to our friends, and I think we talked about a lot of good things today about, you know, reducing salt use, reducing pesticide use, reducing, you know, any kind of herbicides. I mean, you know, like rain gardens, rain barrels, good stormwater management, and just, you know, just keeping an eye out, you know, if you do see something, say something, and I think that will, you know, it goes a long way.
I didn't read the book, but it sounds like there's a bad guy, there's a company, there's somebody that you can point your finger at and say, this is your fault.
It's not always like
But
that.
that's not how it always works, right? Like, everybody contributes to these problems, and so there is nobody to like just point a finger at, so we all have to do something. And I think that's really hard for most people to wrap their heads around. They wanna blame somebody, it's not my fault, it's their fault. No, it's everyone's fault.
And what's the education level down to? Are you in the grade school systems? Are you in preschools?
We are, actually, we're not in preschools. We actually struggle with that quite a bit as an advocacy organization, whether we should do that level of education, because there's groups like Urban Ecology Center and others that do it much better than us. So, you know, we also wanna be smart with the funding that we receive. But we have Trinity Fellows from Marquette, and so we'll get students for 2 years. They're master students, and they've been going into middle schools and high schools to do education around kind of a different water quality curriculum. We have kind of Riverkeeper for Day, we have water monitoring, we have plastic curriculum, There's a bunch of different, there's an emerging contaminants, curriculum as well. So we are doing more and more education and also just partnering with a lot of other groups that do this stuff. When we do a lot of education, I'm doing some teen resource fair on Sunday, in Fox Point, I believe. But you
A lot of
know,
money and funding goes to green schoolyards now too.
yeah, Green Schools, Reflow is doing really amazing work. I mean, we all, you know, like, I think we all just like partner with each other to do as much education as we can and, internships and things like that. But, I mean, it's really important to educate, you know, obviously the next generation is a huge piece of this.
So we put nutritional labels on foods and stuff, and they fought to do that, right? But I think it's made some impact. When you go and buy your food now, fast food, they're up there. Why can't we have that on these plastic items or all these single-use food items or whatever we're buying? Have some more literature staring at consumers as they go through, because I think sometimes you just gotta be right in somebody's face for them to pay attention.
Well, you know, and
I mean-
there's legislative solutions too, like we talked about this road salt bill. We're actually working with a group, we also fund medical drop boxes, it's called Take Back My Meds Milwaukee, if you guys have seen it. You can go to that website and learn where to put your drugs back. Like, why am I fundraising for that? Why is Fund for Lake Michigan paying for that? And where they require in other states that these drug companies have to pay to bring these drugs back. And they're already coming and taking the expired drugs. So they're already going to these pharmacies. So it's like, we're trying to get bills around that, because it's like, why am I paying for this? It's less than 0.1% of drug company profits to take these drugs back. And they're causing opioid problems in the homes, they're causing water quality problems. And similarly with plastic, there are states now that are doing extended producer responsibility bills. So the plastic companies have to pay for recycling, because everyone who's doing recycling is in crisis. City of Milwaukee's recycling, is in crisis. And, a lot of cities have just stopped doing recycling completely. And, these plastic companies and they should be paying for part of this. They should be paying for like all of us who think we're doing good and we're recycling, like they're only recycling like 8% of plastics right now. So, I mean, there are legislative solutions too.
Plastic.
So get involved, there's a lobby day coming up too, I think on April 26th, unfortunately, which is, it's just Earth Month. I'm always like, we need Earth Day all year, not just like 1 week in April, like where I can't sleep.
Thank you guys very
But
much.
there's a lobby day coming, get involved.